Paris, 1943. Autumn leaves blew past the cafe window where Adele Vincent sat, her red lipstick leaving a perfect crescent on the rim of a porcelain cup. She glanced down at the folded newspaper, more interested in what was printed on page 6 than the bold headlines proclaiming German victories. The small advertisement, "Rare books available, inquire within," was her signal. She would visit the bookshop on Rue Saint-Jacques tomorrow at precisely 10 o'clock. The Allied intelligence network had been cultivating her for this moment for nearly a year. A former literature professor with fluent German and an actress's instincts, Adele was their perfect asset. Her mission: infiltrate Nazi headquarters at the Hotel Lutier by any means necessary and gain access to communications about troop movements along the Atlantic Wall. "Mademoiselle, your check," the waiter said, sliding a small slip of paper beneath her saucer. "Merci." She paid and wrapped her navy coat tighter around her slender frame before stepping into the October chill. Paris under occupation was a shadow of itself. German soldiers marched down the Champs-Élysées while Parisians hurried past with downcast eyes. Swastika flags hung from buildings where the tricolour had once fluttered proudly. Even the air felt heavier, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting. The bookshop was dusty and quiet when she arrived the next morning. The elderly proprietor nodded slightly as she approached. "I'm looking for a particular volume," Adele said. "Something by Goethe, perhaps?" The man's eyes flickered. "I have just the thing in the back room." Behind a curtain of faded velvet, a British intelligence officer waited. Colonel James Wheeler was a thin man with a perpetual squint, as if constantly analyzing what he saw. "Miss Vincent, your reputation precedes you." "I hope it's a favorable one," she replied, removing her gloves. "Indeed. Your work with the resistance has been exemplary. But we need more." He explained her new assignment with clinical precision. Major Martin Liebert, an intelligence officer at the Hotel Lutier, had a weakness for culture and beautiful women. He frequently attended the same opera house where Adele occasionally performed in minor roles. She was to engineer a meeting, cultivate his interest, and exploit it to gain access to classified information. "You're asking me to..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "We're asking you to serve your country in the way you're most capable," Wheeler said, his voice softening slightly. "The invasion cannot succeed without intelligence from the inside. Thousands of lives depend on it." Adele thought of her brother Jean, shot by the Germans during the occupation of their village. She thought of her parents, who had fled to the countryside, and her friends who had disappeared in the night, never to return. "I'll do it," she said quietly. 3 nights later, she stood backstage at the Opera Garnier, her heart hammering against her ribs. Intelligence had confirmed Major Liebert would be in attendance. She wore a midnight blue gown that hugged her figure, her dark hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. After the performance, a supporting role in La Bohème that nonetheless showcased her clear soprano, she lingered in the grand foyer, ostensibly waiting for a friend. She positioned herself near a display of medieval manuscripts that she knew would draw Liebert's attention, based on his dossier. He arrived precisely as predicted, tall and imposing in his grey-green uniform, oak leaves gleaming on his collar. Martin Liebert was not what she had expected. His face lacked the harsh angles she'd come to associate with Nazi officers. His eyes were a thoughtful blue, his manner reserved rather than arrogant as he studied the ancient texts. Adele let her program slip from her fingers, landing at his feet. He retrieved it with a courteous nod. "Pardonnez-moi, mademoiselle," he said in accented French. "Merci, monsieur," she replied, then deliberately switched to German. "Did you enjoy the performance?" Surprise registered in his eyes, followed by pleasure at hearing his native tongue. "Very much. Though I confess I was particularly impressed by your Musetta. You brought a humanity to her I hadn't seen before." "You flatter me, Major," she said, noting the rank insignia he wore. "I'm merely a minor player." "There are no minor players in art, only in politics," he said with unexpected frankness. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. He spoke of music and literature with genuine passion, quoting Rilke and discussing Bach's mathematical precision. Not once did he mention the war or German superiority. When he invited her to coffee, she accepted with a practiced smile that masked her unease at how effortless the deception had been. Over the following weeks, their meetings continued. Coffee led to dinner, to walks along the Seine at dusk when the beauty of Paris could almost make one forget the occupation. He spoke of his home in Dresden, his studies in classical architecture interrupted by the war, his widowed mother who wrote him letters filled with recipes he could never make in his quarters. "Why did you join the Wehrmacht?" she asked one evening as they sat in a small restaurant reserved primarily for German officers. She kept her tone merely curious. Martin glanced down at his uniform cuff. "Does anyone really have choices anymore? We all serve something larger than ourselves now. Some causes are more worthy of service than others," she said softly. His eyes met hers, troubled. "In war, Adele, the truth is the first casualty. What we're told and what is real." He stopped himself. "Forgive me. This is hardly appropriate dinner conversation." Adele filed away his momentary candor. Doubts among German officers could be as valuable as battle plans to her handlers. Yet something in his expression made her chest tighten uncomfortably. By December, she had gained his trust. When Martin mentioned a staff dinner at the Hotel Luthier, she expressed interest in seeing the historic building. He hesitated only briefly before offering to show her his office afterward. "It's nothing special," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Just files and more files. The bureaucracy of war." Those files were exactly what she needed to photograph with the miniature camera concealed in her powder compact. The night of the dinner arrived with a dusting of snow over Paris. Adele wore a burgundy dress and a string of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned her hair. "This is what we've been waiting for," Wheeler had told her that morning during their brief meeting in the back of a flower shop. "Get us the deployment schedules for the coastal defenses. The invasion depends on it." Martin greeted her at the hotel entrance, handsome in his dress uniform. He introduced her as a friend from the opera, and if his colleagues had suspicions about the true nature of their relationship, they kept them hidden behind polite smiles. During dinner, seated among high-ranking officers discussing art and wine as if they weren't orchestrating death across Europe, Adele felt a wave of revulsion, not just for them, but for herself. The ease with which she played her role disturbed her. Later, as promised, Martin led her through the Grand Hotel, now transformed into Nazi headquarters. Her pulse quickened as they approached his office. "It's just down this corridor," he said. A guard nodded to Martin as they passed. Adele kept her expression neutral despite her racing heart. The office was small but neat, with a view of a courtyard now shrouded in darkness. Maps covered one wall, marked with colored pins. A portrait of Hitler hung obligatorily above the desk. "Would you like some cognac?" Martin asked, opening a drawer. "Please." She needed him relaxed, preferably looking away. As he poured the amber liquid into 2 glasses, she surveyed the room with practiced casualness. A filing cabinet stood in the corner. On the desk lay several folders marked with the eagle and swastika. "To beauty in dark times," Martin said, handing her a glass. Their fingers brushed, and she felt the now familiar warmth his touch always brought, a physiological reaction she'd learned to ignore. "Your work seems fascinating," she said, gesturing to the maps. "Strategy and planning. Tedious, more often than not." He smiled ruefully. "I was an architect before all this. I designed spaces for living, not for war." "May I?" she asked, approaching his desk. "Of course." She leaned over the papers, mentally photographing what she could while reaching for her compact. A transport schedule to Normandy, artillery placements, patrol rotations, invaluable information for the Allies. "Adele," Martin said suddenly, his voice different. She turned, compact still unopened in her hand. He was looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before, a mixture of sadness and resignation. "You don't need to do this," he said quietly. The room seemed to still. "Do what?" "Search my desk. Take information." He gestured to her hand. Whatever that is, I suspect it's not just for powdering your nose. Fear flooded her veins. Had she been so transparent? Would he call the guards now? Martin, I don't understand, please, he interrupted, his voice gentle. No more pretending. Not between us. He crossed to the window and drew the blackout curtain closed. Then, to her astonishment, he gathered the folders from his desk and held them out to her. Take what you need, he said. Coastal defense plans, munitions transport schedules, everything. She stared at him, unable to comprehend what was happening. Why would you? Because I've seen enough, he said simply. Because Dresden is being reduced to rubble. Because this madness has to end, and perhaps this will help end it sooner. You know I'm. She couldn't finish the sentence. A spy? Yes. I suspected after our third meeting. You ask too many perfect questions. Your German is flawless, but occasionally your idioms are just slightly academic rather than colloquial. And yet you continue to see me. She felt strangely wounded. To pretend. Was it all pretense for you, Adele? He asked, his eyes searching hers. She wanted to say yes, to maintain the lie that had become her armor. But the truth surfaced against her will. No, she whispered. Not all. He nodded, as if he'd known all along. Take the documents. But you should leave Paris. They're increasing counterintelligence operations. It won't be safe for you here much longer. What about you? If these disappear, I'll manage. Papers get misplaced in bureaucracies all the time. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Adele hesitated, then opened her compact and began photographing the documents as quickly as she could. Martin watched silently, a man witnessing his own treason. When she finished, he took the folders back and returned them to their places. Then he poured them each another cognac. Why? She asked finally. Why help me? Martin stared into his glass. My brother was in the Abwehr, military intelligence. He discovered evidence of atrocities in the East. Camps where people. He swallowed hard. He tried to report it through official channels. 3 days later, he was found dead. Suicide, they called it. Adele's throat tightened. I'm sorry. There's a sickness at the heart of what we're doing, Adele. I can't stop it alone. But perhaps this? He gestured to her compact. She reached for his hand across the desk. This touch was different, honest for the first time. Come with me, she said impulsively. The resistance can get you out. He shook his head. And go where? I'd be a deserter to the Germans, a Nazi to the Allies. I would speak for you. It's too dangerous. For both of us. He squeezed her hand. But thank you for suggesting it. They sat in silence as the clock ticked toward midnight. The cognac warmed Adele's chest, but couldn't dispel the chill of reality setting in. I should go, she said finally. Martin nodded. I'll walk you to the entrance. They moved through the corridors like strangers again, careful not to stand too close. At the door, he took her hand formally. Auf Wiedersehen, Adele. Goodbye, Martin. She walked into the snowy night without looking back, the weight of the camera heavy in her purse, the weight in her chest heavier still. The information she delivered proved crucial. Within days, she was extracted to London, where she worked translating intercepted German communications. She never told her handlers about Martin's willing participation. Some truths were hers alone to keep. D-Day came in June. As Allied forces stormed the beaches, Adele thought of Martin and prayed he had survived the initial assault. But as the Allies pushed inland, reports came of desperate German resistance and heavy casualties on both sides. In August, as Paris was liberated, a letter reached her through circuitous channels. It bore no signature, only a quotation from Rilke, "For beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror, which we are still just able to endure." Below it, a single line, Dresden still stands. As do I. as do the questions we never answered. She understood its meaning. He was alive. She pressed the paper to her lips. After the war, Adele returned to France. The country was rebuilding, trying to forget the shame of occupation while honoring those who had resisted. Her service earned her medals she never displayed and nightmares she couldn't escape. She resumed teaching at the university, specializing in German literature. Her students never knew the personal cost behind her intimate understanding of the texts. In the spring of 1950, she was lecturing on Goethe when she noticed a man sitting at the back of the hall. Older, leaner, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, but unmistakably Martin. She finished her lecture mechanically, her mind racing. The students filed out, but he remained seated. When the room emptied, she approached him slowly. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I had to see you." His German was the same, but his bearing had changed. He carried himself like a civilian now, wearing a simple grey suit. "How did you find me?" "I'm an architect again. There's a project in Strasbourg, rebuilding what we destroyed." He paused. "I heard about a professor who gave the most insightful lectures on German literature. Who understood the conflict in our national soul as if she'd lived it herself." "Martin, I'm not staying in France," he interrupted gently. "I've accepted a position in Switzerland. Neutral ground." He smiled slightly at the irony. "I just wanted to know if you were all right." "I'm alive," she said. "Some days that feels like enough." He nodded in understanding. "And the rest?" "I teach. I try to help my students understand what happened, though I'm not sure I understand it myself." A silence fell between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "We were on opposite sides," he said finally. "Were we?" "I'm not so sure anymore." She looked directly into his eyes. "In the end, I think we wanted the same thing." "Peace," he murmured. "And truth," she added. Martin reached into his pocket and withdrew a small book. "I brought you something." "Rilke." "A better copy than the one we discussed that night at the opera." She took it, their fingers brushing just as they had all those years ago in his office. The touch still carried a current, but now without deception. "Will you be in Strasbourg long?" she asked. "Through autumn." Adele thought of the distance between Paris and Strasbourg. A train journey. A few hours. A possibility. "Perhaps I could visit. There's an exhibition of medieval manuscripts I've been meaning to see." His smile reached his eyes this time. "I would like that very much." They walked together through the university courtyard, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. The afternoon light caught the new leaves, green and full of promise after a long winter. Neither of them spoke of love. After so much pretense, such declarations seemed inadequate. But as they reached the street and prepared to part ways again, Martin turned to her. "In another life," he began. "In this one," Adele corrected gently. "We start from here." He nodded, understanding. The past could not be undone, but perhaps it could be carried more lightly together. She watched him walk away, his figure gradually blending with the other pedestrians on the boulevard. This time, she knew, it wasn't goodbye. The spy and the officer had both played their parts in a terrible drama not of their making. Now, in the tentative peace that followed, perhaps Adele and Martin, just two people with memories both bitter and sweet, could write a different story.